Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this expectation of precision.
Right, yeah. Like it's a hard science.
Yeah, absolutely. It is like engineering. I mean, you fall off a ladder, you go to the hospital, and the x-ray shows that jagged white line on your radius bone. The doctor just points to the screen and says, well, there is the fracture.
It is binary. I mean, the bone is broken or it is whole, it is clean, it's visible, and it's categorized.
But then, you step into the realm of theology and suddenly that x-ray machine just stops working.
Oh, yeah, completely.
We are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky because we are trying to measure the infinite, and human beings get very uncomfortable when they cannot put things into neat, measurable boxes. So welcome to Reformed Thinking.
So glad to be here.
Today, we are undertaking a comprehensive deep dive into a specific, highly influential stack of source material. We are looking at excerpts from Charles Hodge's Systematic Theology, and specifically focusing on his chapter concerning rationalism.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters when human intellect tries to map out the mind of God.
Yeah.
If you could see the visual backdrop I have set up for our conversation today, you would see a shifting scene. Imagine like grand, towering historical libraries with thousands of leather-bound volumes.
Okay, I am picturing it.
And those libraries are blending seamlessly into vast, glowing celestial maps. That image represents the staggering scope of human thought attempting to measure the infinite. We are looking at the tension between the books we write and the stars God placed in the sky.
Wow, that is a great visual. And that is the core objective for you listening today. We are going to establish the precise boundary between human reason and divine revelation.
Which is a huge task.
It is massive. We want to figure out why elevating the human mind to the position of supreme judge creates catastrophic philosophical and spiritual failures.
Right.
So we have to start by defining the mind's overreach. What actually is rationalism? Now, to be clear right off the bat, rationalism is not the act of using reason.
Right. I think that is a huge misconception.
It is. Christians use reason all the time. But Hodge defines it as the system that assigns undue authority to reason in matters of religion. The cognitive faculty, the part of us that perceives, compares, judges, and infers, is elevated far above its proper station.
The categorization Hodge provides here is really fascinating. He breaks rationalism down into 3 distinct forms.
Okay.
And understanding these forms is crucial for seeing how this overreach happens in real time. So the first category is the deistical form.
Right, the classic one.
Yeah. This one is straightforward in its rejection. It outright denies either the possibility or the fact of any supernatural revelation.
Okay.
It dictates that human reason is the only source and the only ground of all religious knowledge. To a deist, if a truth cannot be deduced by observing nature or by human logic, it just does not exist.
Okay, so the second form is much more subtle.
Very much so.
It admits that a supernatural revelation is possible. It even admits that such a revelation is contained in the Christian scriptures. But it insists that the truths revealed are, in reality, just truths of reason.
Meaning reason must be able to comprehend and verify these truths, or they get thrown out.
Right. The mind acts as a strict filter.
Then we have the third form, which Hodge calls dogmatism.
I find this one so interesting.
Oh, it is wild. This form admits that many truths of revelation cannot be discovered by human reason, and they have to be received upon authority.
Which sounds good at first.
Right. It sounds totally orthodox, but then it claims that once these truths are revealed, they can be philosophically explained, mathematically established, and raised from the sphere of simple faith into the sphere of hard knowledge.
Wow.
Yeah. It takes a truth given by God and tries to prove it using human equations.
Before we dig into the specifics of each of those forms, the historical context Hodge provides is really eye-opening.
Oh, the stuff about Germany.
Yeah. He points out that the old form of rationalism actually disappeared in Germany when a philosophy called monism, or pantheism, took over the academic landscape.
The German philosophical landscape shifted entirely during that era. I mean, monism denies any dualism. It affirms the absolute identity of God and the world.
So there is no separation at all.
None. So if God and the universe are the exact same substance, the entire debate between human reason and a transcendent God just vanishes.
Because there is no transcendent God to debate about.
Precisely. There is no longer any distinction between the natural and the supernatural. The pantheistic philosophers actually looked at the rationalists with total contempt because pantheism erased the very categories the rationalists were arguing about.
That is wild.
If your mind is a piece of the divine mind, then your thoughts are divine thoughts. The idea of an external revelation becomes completely obsolete.
I was trying to visualize this massive overreach of the human mind, where it assigns itself this undue authority. Think of human reason like a thermometer.
Okay, a thermometer.
Yeah. A thermometer is an incredibly useful tool. You absolutely need it for the specific job of measuring the ambient temperature of a room.
Right. It is a very defined function.
But a rationalist takes that thermometer and demands it function as the sun. They want the measuring tool to generate the heat and the light for the entire solar system.
Wow.
It is the right tool used for an impossible job. You just cannot use a glass tube of mercury to illuminate the Earth.
That is a highly accurate way to picture the discrepancy. I mean, reason is an instrument of measurement and reception, not the source of reality itself. When you demand that your thermometer heat the Earth, you end up freezing in the dark.
Absolutely.
Because the most extreme version of rationalism, the deistical form, denies that God can even speak to humanity. We have to start our analysis right there.
You have to tackle the root.
We must first examine the deistical claim that a supernatural revelation is simply impossible.
Which brings us to what we might call the deistical mirage. It is the battle between the clockmaker God and the present ruler.
The Enlightenment favorite.
Right. The deists operate on this central argument that God does not interfere in the world. They argue that if God has to intervene, or if he speaks directly into history, it implies his original creation was flawed.
The classic clockmaker concept.
Yeah, God winds up the universe like a massive, intricate grandfather clock, sets a pendulum in motion, and then just walks away to let the gears turn on their own.
Hodge dismantles this premise completely. He argues that the deist theory contradicts the testimony of our own moral nature.
How so?
Well, our consciousness implies we are constantly in the presence of a God who takes cognizance of our acts, who orders our circumstances, and who provides for us.
Right, we feel that intuitively.
But on a much higher philosophical level, Hodge points out that the conception of God as an active ruler of the world, one who has his creatures in his hands, who is able to control them at his pleasure and hold active communion with them, is a vastly superior concept to an absent clockmaker.
It is way more majestic.
It's far more consistent with the idea of infinite perfection.
A God who is intimately involved, who numbers the hairs on your head, is superior to a deity who just hits the start button and goes to sleep.
Spot on.
And Hodge drives home the absolute necessity of a supernatural revelation here. Every single human being feels an agonizing need for answers about our origin, about the reality of sin, and about our final destiny.
And history proves that the masses cannot find these answers through intellect alone. Hodge is very blunt about this reality.
He does not hold back.
No, he notes that without a supernatural revelation, no matter how skilled a philosopher a man is, he knows that death is an entrance into the unknown. It is a gate into total darkness.
Terrifying.
The heathen nations, ancient and modern, civilized and savage, have all failed to solve the great problems of humanity by the light of nature. I mean, you can look at the greatest minds of ancient Greece or Rome. They could build aqueducts and invent democracy, but they could not cure the despair of the human soul.
Hodge even points out that when people rely solely on human wisdom, it leads to what he calls the hell of pantheism.
Oh, that phrase is so striking.
It really is. You get these philosophical conclusions that destroy domestic virtue, social order, and individual happiness. Think about it. If everything is God, as pantheism claims, then good is God and evil is God.
Right, there is no moral distinction.
Cruelty is just as divine as kindness. That framework obliterates the basis for any moral society. So we desperately need a revelation from outside our closed system.
We need a voice from outside the room.
Yes. And then Hodge gives this incredible defense of why the scriptures are that specific revelation. He talks about how 50 different authors wrote the books of the Bible over the course of 1,500 years.
Yet, despite that massive time span, the variety of authors, the different languages, and the diverse cultural contexts, the documents form a perfect organic whole.
It is amazing when you really think about it.
It is clearly the product of one single mind directing the process.
I love the specific analogy he uses from the text to illustrate this point. He says the scriptures are as clearly a development as the oak from the acorn.
Oh, that's a fantastic analogy.
Genesis 3.15, the promise that the seed of the woman shall bruise the serpent's head is the acorn. It contains the DNA for everything that follows.
Right, the whole tree is in the seed.
The entire New Testament, the Gospels, the Epistles, the Book of Revelation, is the fully grown oak tree. You
Yeah.
cannot understand one branch or leaf without reference to the whole organism. It is a living, breathing continuity.
That organic unity is a devastating counter to the secular idea that the Bible is just a disjointed collection of human myths stitched together by later editors.
It really is.
Add to that the argument from prophecy. We see specific events in the New Testament predicted centuries earlier in the Old Testament with shocking clarity.
Details that nobody could have guessed.
Furthermore, there is the argument from the effects of the gospel. The Bible has determined the course of history, overthrown false religions, and established the moral baseline for modern civilization.
I was thinking about the deist mindset regarding intervention. If a software developer issues a patch for a video game, does that mean the developer failed in their initial design?
Oh, that is a great modern way to look at it.
Or does it mean they are actively managing the user's experience and responding to the dynamic environment of the server? I mean, the deists claim God is too perfect to interact with us, but a software developer who abandons their software, who never issues an update or moderates the server, is considered a terrible developer.
Yeah, you would stop playing the game.
The irony is staggering. The deists try to protect God's dignity by making him completely irrelevant to our actual lives.
That comparison highlights the flaw perfectly. Intervention is not a sign of a flawed original design. It is a sign of dynamic, ongoing sovereignty.
Yes.
The deists confuse a static, lifeless machine with a dynamic, relational kingdom. A kingdom requires a king who issues decrees, responds to rebellions, and guides his subjects.
So once we establish that God can speak, and that the historical evidence shows he has spoken, we encounter a much more subtle evasion.
The sneaky one.
This brings us to the thinkers who accept that the Bible exists, but they set up a roadblock. They insist their own intellect must approve the contents of the Bible before they will believe them.
This is the second form of rationalism.
Mm-hmm.
It operates on a very specific Latin maxim. Nil credi posse, quod a ratione capi et intelligere nequeat.
Say that 3 times fast.
Right.
Yeah.
That translates to, nothing can be believed which cannot be apprehended and understood by reason.
I must understand to believe that is the trap. They filter the Bible through their own cognitive limitations.
They become the ultimate editors.
They accept what makes sense to their human logic, and they reject what does not compute. For example, if you ask a second-form rationalist why they believe in the immortality of the soul, they say, well, because it is reasonable. I can deduce that from my own sense of consciousness.
Yeah, sure.
But if you ask them why they do not believe the doctrine of the Trinity, they answer because it is unreasonable. They do not feel bound to believe what the sacred writers teach just because the writers teach it.
The authority of God is subjected to the approval of the human mind.
Which is incredibly arrogant when you say it out loud.
They operate on the assumption that the revelation was given to fallible men whose modes of thinking were heavily modified by their ancient culture.
So they view the Bible with a lot of suspicion.
Exactly. To them, the scriptures abound with misapprehensions and inconclusive arguments. It becomes the primary office of human reason to sift these incongruous materials. Reason must separate the wheat from the chaff.
And how do they define the wheat?
The wheat is what human reason understands. The chaff is what reason cannot prove or comprehend.
Which puts the human being completely in the driver's seat of the universe.
Right.
Hodge's refutation of this is brilliant because he attacks it from the angle of nature. He points out that we believe the incomprehensible constantly in the natural world.
Oh, all the time.
A person believes that paper thrown upon a roaring fire will burn even if they have zero understanding of the chemical process of rapid oxidation and combustion.
You don't need a degree in chemistry to use a fireplace.
No. We all believe that plants grow from seeds and that biological reproduction happens, but the actual mechanism of life generating more life remains an astounding mystery.
Hodge argues that making the human intelligence the measure of all truth is an insane presumption. To demand that the infinite God must fit inside the finite human skull is a category error of the highest order.
It is like trying to pour the ocean into a teacup.
We accept facts in biology, astronomy, and physics without fully comprehending the underlying mechanisms. Why should theology, the study of the infinite creator, be the only field devoid of mystery.
He also brings up the elitism of this system, which I found totally fascinating.
Yeah, that is a great point he makes.
Because if we must understand what we believe, then only highly trained philosophers can be religious. Only the educated elite could comprehend the rational grounds for theology.
It creates a massive barrier to entry.
It completely alienates the poor, the uneducated, and the common worker. Widespread as rationalism has been in academic circles, it has never controlled the creed of any widespread church. True religion is founded on the incomprehensible and the infinite, which is accessible to everyone through faith, regardless of their academic pedigree or IQ.
This point raises a fascinating observation regarding the secular world's view of knowledge. Hodge brings in a quote from Herbert Spencer, a highly prominent secular philosopher of his time.
Right, a secular guy.
Even Spencer admitted that we are surrounded on every side by the incomprehensible. He wrote that the ultimate truth is that the power which the universe manifests to us is utterly inscrutable.
Utterly inscrutable.
So if even secular science admits we are constantly interacting with the unknowable and the incomprehensible, how can anyone logically bar religion from having mysteries?
It is entirely hypocritical. If I refuse to believe in quantum mechanics because I personally cannot comprehend how a particle can be in two places at once, physicists would just laugh at me.
Yeah, they would kick you out of the lab.
They would say, my lack of comprehension does not negate the reality of the universe. Yet, when a theologian says the same thing about the nature of God, the rationalist cries foul.
There is a clear double standard.
But wait, if we accept that we cannot comprehend these mysteries, how do we avoid just falling for a scam? I mean, if we accept things we do not understand, what stops someone from joining a cult based on blind belief?
That is the necessary tension, and it is a vital question. Ascent to truth must always be founded on evidence, which Hodge addresses thoroughly later on.
Okay, good.
Faith is not a blind, irrational leap into the dark. It is ascent founded on testimony. We trust the testimony of our senses when we cross the street.
Hopefully.
We trust the testimony of other humans when we read a history book. The core question is, why would we not trust the testimony of God when he speaks?
That is the real issue.
The distinction here is between faith and knowledge. If we destroy that distinction and demand that we only receive as true what we completely understand, Hodge says the whole world is beggared. We lose all that sustains and ennobles human life.
We can rationally believe what we cannot fully understand. We can be assured of truths, even if they are surrounded by objections we cannot perfectly answer.
Yes, that is the essence of faith.
Because the second form clearly fails by demanding we comprehend the infinite, a third group tried a totally different tactic. What if we accept the mysteries, but we use philosophy to mathematically prove them?
Welcome to the third form, dogmatism. This is the sneaky variation of rationalism.
Dogmatism attempts to transmute simple faith into hard knowledge. Historically, this meant claiming simple faith was fine for the commoners, the uneducated masses who needed simple stories.
The people who just needed milk.
Right. But the educated elites, they could find the philosophical proofs behind biblical doctrines. They could graduate from faith to knowledge.
The early church saw this tendency with the Platonizing fathers, and it continues steadily through the Middle Ages. They established a rigid distinction between pistis, which is faith, and gnosis, which is knowledge.
Okay, faith versus knowledge.
The objects of faith were the doctrinal statements of the Bible, received on the testimony of God. But the objects of knowledge were the speculative, philosophical ideas underlying those doctrines, received on their own inherent evidence.
And then we get to the historical reality of Wolffianism.
Oh, this part is wild.
Christian Wolff was a highly influential professor at Halle and Marburg in the 1700s. His school of followers went absolutely wild with this concept. They literally attempted to prove the Trinity, the specific nature of the Redeemer, the incarnation, and the eternity of punishment using mathematical and philosophical demonstrations.
Math equations for theology.
They wanted a strictly demonstrative dogmatical system. Imagine trying to use a geometric proof to explain how the Word became flesh.
They wanted to remove the boundary, separating the comprehensible from the incomprehensible. Their grand design was to elevate Christianity from a system of revealed truth into a comprehensive system of philosophy.
So they thought they were helping.
Yeah, they thought they were doing Christianity a favor by making it academically rigorous according to the standards of the Enlightenment.
Which sounds noble to an academic, but Hodge unpacks why this is fatal. It is essentially rationalistic at its core. It shifts the basis of belief from the authoritative testimony of God, the thus saith the Lord, to the shifting quicksand of human logic.
There is a massive structural difference between a conviction founded on the well-authenticated testimony of God and a conviction founded on a philosophical demonstration.
Huge difference.
One rests on the divine, the other rests entirely on the human. If you read a philosophical demonstration of the Trinity, you feel completely at liberty to accept it or reject it because it is just the product of another human mind.
Right, it is just an argument.
It has no binding moral authority over your conscience. Dogmatism changes the whole nature of Christianity. It takes its place as just another phase of human speculation that rises and falls like waves of the sea.
Hodge has this brilliant phrasing. He says, relying on reason for truths that can only be revealed is like studying logic with a microscope or scalpel. It is using the wrong tool for the environment. If I prove the Trinity with a math equation, and then a brilliant mathematician comes along next year and finds a flaw in my calculus, did God just cease to exist?
Well, according to that system, yeah.
Or did I just use the completely wrong tool to evaluate him? My faith would be shattered because my faith was in the math, not in God.
You use the wrong tool, and the result is always disastrous. History proves that dogmatism is the predecessor of full-blown rationalism.
It always leads there.
When men indulge the disposition to demand philosophical proof for articles of faith, they develop a state of mind that revolts at authority. When their human proofs inevitably fail, and they always fail when applied to the infinite, they refuse to admit as true what they cannot prove. It is the direct parent of unbelief.
The Bible itself is remarkably clear against this. From beginning to end, the sacred writers present themselves as witnesses to a reality, not philosophers constructing a system.
That is a critical distinction.
Paul tells the Corinthians that he did not come with excellence of speech or human wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit. The gospel is received on divine testimony. You have to become a fool to be wise.
You have to empty your cup.
You have to renounce dependence on your own reasoning ability as the ultimate guide to reality.
We must rely on our senses within the sphere of sense perceptions. We rely on our reason within the sphere of rational truths like mathematics or logic. But we must rely on God alone in all that relates to the things of God.
Amen.
He only truly knows who consents with the docility of a child to be taught by the Creator.
If reason is a terrible master and a faulty tool for proving the infinite, what is its actual job? We cannot just throw our brains in the trash.
No, definitely not.
We are commanded to love God with all our mind. We need to define the legitimate boundaries of the human intellect.
Christians do not reject reason. We define its proper office. Hodge outlines 3 critical functions for human reason.
Okay, let's break this down.
The first is that reason is necessary for the reception of a revelation. Theologians call this the usus organicus, or the instrumental use of reason.
You cannot reveal truth to a brick wall.
Or a toaster.
Or a golden retriever. To receive a truth as an object of faith, we must intellectually apprehend it. If I say, the human soul is immortal, you have to possess the cognitive ability to know what the words soul and immortal mean.
Right, the words have to have meaning.
Knowledge is essential to faith. In believing, we affirm the truth of a proposition. We can affirm nothing of that of which we know nothing.
Here we must draw a vital, non-negotiable distinction. The difference between knowing and comprehending.
Okay, this is huge.
A child knows what the words God is a spirit mean. They grasp the proposition well enough to believe it. But no created being, not even the highest angel, can comprehend the Almighty unto perfection.
We can't wrap our minds around it completely.
We know the plan of salvation, but we cannot comprehend the depths of its mysteries.
It is the difference between knowing that a thing is and knowing how or why it is. I know that my will controls my voluntary muscles. I tell my hand to lift a coffee mug, and my hand lifts it.
Simple enough.
I know it happens. Do I comprehend the exact firing of the synapses, the neurochemical miracles, and the muscle contractions making it possible? Not a chance. I am not a neurologist.
But you still drank the coffee.
Exactly. I do not deny my hand is moving just because I lack the biochemical comprehension. I know the fact without comprehending the mechanism.
The second function of reason is to judge the credibility of a revelation. Now, we have to define our terms carefully here.
Yeah, because credibility can mean a lot of things today.
Credible here does not mean probable or easy to believe. It means able to be believed. The opposite of credible is incredible, which literally means impossible. Reason has the judicium contradictionis, which is the prerogative to judge contradiction.
Because the impossible cannot be believed by a rational mind. A thing might be strange, unaccountable, and completely unintelligible to us, but still be perfectly credible.
Like the virgin birth.
Yes, exactly. But a true impossibility cannot be an object of faith. If a proposition is seen to be impossible, no authority and no amount of evidence can impose the obligation to receive it as true.
We have to be exceedingly careful not to arbitrarily determine what is impossible, just based on our personal prejudices or limited experience.
Because we have a lot of prejudices.
Hodge gives strict parameters for what constitutes a true impossibility. First, anything that involves a direct contradiction is impossible. For example, that a thing is and is not at the same time, or that a square is a circle.
Basic logic.
Second, it is impossible that God should do or command what is morally wrong. Third, it is impossible that God would require us to believe what contradicts the fundamental laws of belief He impressed upon our human nature. And fourth, one truth cannot contradict another truth.
I compare this specific role of reason to a jury in a courtroom.
Oh, that is a helpful picture.
The jury does not write the laws. Writing the laws belongs exclusively to the judge and the legislature, which in this scenario is God. But the jury is absolutely required to sit in the box, evaluate the credibility of the witnesses, and determine the adequacy of the evidence presented. They have a job to do, and it is a critical one. Faith without adequate, appropriate evidence is totally irrational.
Which leads directly to the third function of reason, judging the evidences of a revelation. Faith involves assent, and assent is a conviction produced by evidence.
You need proof to convict.
The scriptures never demand faith, except on the ground of adequate evidence. Jesus himself said, "If I had not done among them the works which none other man did, they had not had sin." He recognized that faith cannot be required without evidence to support the claim.
When the Bible treats unbelief as a sin, as the great sin for which men will be condemned, it presumes that the unbelief does not arise from a lack of evidence.
That is a staggering thought.
It arises from a wicked, willful rejection of the truth despite the proof. Men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. Unbelief is a moral failure, not an intellectual shortage.
We concede to reason all the prerogatives it can rightfully claim. God does not require faith without knowledge, or faith in the impossible, or faith without evidence.
It is a very balanced view.
Christianity actively opposes both superstition, which is faith without evidence, and rationalism, which refuses to believe what it does not understand despite the overwhelming evidence.
This role of reason as a jury evaluating evidence naturally brings us to the modern arenas where evidence is most fiercely debated. How do philosophy, science, and revelation interact?
The big battleground.
Because they are all occupying common ground. They all assume to teach what is true concerning God, man, the world, and our relation to the Creator.
While their objects are largely identical, their methods are essentially different. Philosophy seeks knowledge by speculation, induction, and the exercise of human intellectual faculties.
Starting from the ground up.
Theology relies upon authority, receiving as truth whatever God has revealed in His Word, starting from the top down.
Hodge gives a meticulous rule of engagement here. He draws a massive thick line between facts and theories.
That line is so important.
Revelation cannot contradict verified facts. Why? Because God is the author of our nature and the maker of heaven and earth. God cannot contradict himself. He wrote the book of nature and the book of scripture. If a fact in the natural world is undeniable, the Bible cannot contradict it.
However, theologians are completely free to reject scientific theories. Facts are determined by the wisdom and will of God. Theories are human speculations deduced from those facts.
And theories change.
The facts of light, electricity, and magnetism are permanent. The theories concerning them are constantly changing. The facts of geology are to be admitted. The theories of geologists have no coercive authority over the conscience.
Scientific theory changes constantly. Yesterday's unquestionable revolutionary breakthrough is today's outdated misconception. I see people constantly panicking because a new scientific theory seems to contradict the Bible.
Right, they get so anxious.
But how does an individual listener actually discern the difference between a verified fact and a loud popular theory?
It requires patience and a refusal to panic. Hodge points out that scientific men often demand for their theories the authority that is due only to established facts. We have to wait for the dust to settle.
Give it time.
Sometimes, if a scientific fact is undeniably verified over time, theologians must realize their interpretation of Scripture was flawed, not the Scripture itself.
The classic historical example is the Copernican solar system. Both Romanist and Protestant theologians resisted the idea that the Earth moved around the sun.
They fought it hard.
They interpreted certain poetic verses in the Bible in a literal way that contradicted Copernicus. They staked the authority of the Bible on their specific interpretation of those verses.
Which is always a dangerous game.
When the heliocentric theory proved to be a verified, undeniable fact, their interpretation had to be given up. But the Bible received no injury. We just learned a valuable lesson to let science take its course, knowing the scriptures will accommodate themselves to all well-authenticated facts.
But when we are dealing with philosophy, the conclusions of human intelligence as to what is true, there is a strict, unyielding hierarchy.
Philosophy does not get the same pass.
When human speculation conflicts with the Bible, philosophy must yield. Man must yield to God. Whether it is the philosophy of the early Gnostics who claimed matter was evil, or Kant's categories limiting human knowledge, or Hegel's idealistic pantheism, if it comes into conflict with what is taught in the Bible, it is refuted.
The wisdom of men is foolishness to God.
Exactly.
To evaluate the physical facts of the world, we rely on the instruments God gave us to perceive reality, our five senses. This brings us to the senses as God's built-in reality check.
This is a really profound section of the book.
This section of Hodge's analysis really surprised me, but the logic is airtight. It stems from a massive historical dispute over the Roman Catholic doctrine of transubstantiation.
The doctrine of transubstantiation teaches that the bread and wine in the Eucharist literally, physically transform into the actual body and blood of Christ. But this contradicts the testimony of our senses of sight, taste, and touch. The bread still looks, tastes, and feels exactly like bread.
Yes, to every physical test, it is bread.
To defend their doctrine against the evidence of the senses, the Romanists claim that the senses simply cannot be trusted in matters of faith.
The Protestant defense against this is incredibly sharp. Hodge says that God imprinted the laws of belief into our very nature. Confidence in the well-authenticated testimony of our senses is one of those foundational laws. We are constrained by our Creator to confide in them.
Trusting our well-authenticated senses is a form of trusting God. It assumes God would not place us under the necessity of error by giving us guides we cannot safely trust.
He wouldn't set us up to fail like that.
If we abandon our senses, all ground of certainty is destroyed. We fall into absolute skepticism. We could not even know that we exist or that the external world exists.
It is totally suicidal to the Christian faith. All external supernatural revelation is addressed directly to the senses. If your senses are invalid, how do you hear a sermon?
You can't.
You are relying on your sense of hearing. How do you read the Bible? You are relying on your sense of sight. If you cannot trust your eyes to evaluate a piece of bread, you cannot trust your eyes to read the Gospel of John. The same God gave you the eyes and the Gospel.
This raises a persistent objection, though, which the opposition always brings up to discredit the senses. What about when our senses deceive us?
I have thought about that exact counter-argument. What about optical illusions? A straight stick looks bent when you put it in a glass of water. A mirage in the desert looks like a pool of water. Do our eyes not lie to us frequently?
Hodge anticipates that rebuttal and uses it to clarify the boundary. The senses are absolutely reliable within their legitimate sphere, and when the proper conditions for correct perception are present.
Conditions matter.
The eye might deceive you when the conditions of correct vision are missing, like light refraction through water or heat waves on desert sand. But that does not prove the eye is not to be trusted within its appropriate limits. We do not throw away the entire concept of vision because water refracts light. The senses, operating under normal conditions, are God's built-in reality check.
What did this entire discussion mean for you today? We have analyzed deism, pantheism, dogmatism, and the absolute reliability of our human faculties when used properly. I want to leave you with a chilling modern application to consider.
I love this thought experiment.
We have seen that rationalism makes the human mind the ultimate standard of truth. Whatever reason can process and prove becomes the highest authority in the universe.
Which places humanity on a very fragile, incredibly dangerous throne.
Spot on. So what happens as artificial intelligence begins to process logic faster, more comprehensively, and more accurately than any human mind ever could?
Oh, wow.
If pure reasoning power is the highest authority in the universe, does an advanced AI logically become the new god of the rationalist? If you refuse the revelation of a personal God because you demand that everything submit to a logical processor, you might just end up bowing to a server rack. The machine will outreason you every single time.
If human intellect is the measure of all things, we are about to be measured and found severely wanting by our own creations.
It brings us right back to that broken X-ray machine. We want clean lines, we want perfect visibility, we want to diagnose the infinite using the finite tools of logic and mathematics, but the muddy waters remain. We cannot comprehend the Almighty unto perfection. We are just called to listen to Him when He speaks. Thank you so much for joining the conversation today. Keep your minds sharp, keep your Bibles open, and we will see you on the next deep dive.